All right, I didn't know exactly what format this was going to be in, but I said screw it. I probably won't be doing a review of Venom Let There Be Carnage, mostly for the fact that I haven't been doing a whole lot of initial reactions this past year. It's something that I'm thinking about doing maybe next year again, but for this year, with the pandemic, with movie releases being so strangely done and mostly everything being released on streaming, so I'm not necessarily getting to everything the weekend it comes out. I thought it was just best to maybe not, stick with doing any, initial reactions. Um, but I do want to talk about some of these movies in some capacity. And one of the ways I thought about doing it was maybe just doing some kind of review that catches up at least on the Marvel movies that came out this year, like Black Widow, Shang-Chi, maybe some of the other superhero movies as well. I did talk about Zack Snyder's Justice League just because that was such an interesting phenomenon with that film. And the Suicide Squad. I'd love to talk about the Suicide Squad. I actually have a lot of thoughts about that movie, and I really did like it a lot. But right now, we're going to talk about Venom Let There Be Carnage, a movie I was not very excited for. A sequel to a movie that I wasn't a huge fan of. I thought it was just fine. The first one I did not find to be as bad as everybody was saying, or at least the critics were saying. And the sequel, didn't really get me hyped. Because as much as I'm like, well, I don't think the first one's that bad, it still to me isn't a great movie. It's just kind of it's one you take in the moment. It feels a little too long. It feels like too much like an origin story. I mean, that's exactly what it is, but it just follows way too many of the origin story tropes and kind of holds itself back for a sequel that I didn't think was going to play out, just from what I've seen with the trailers, especially. It just didn't look like a sequel that was going to be, it didn't seem like it was going to be much better than the first one, or at least if it was, it still wasn't a movie I was going to fall in love with. And, I'm kind of shocked that I thought the movie was actually worse than the first one because a lot of people have said it is an improvement. It's actually been getting okay reviews, but it wasn't the movie I was too into. So I guess I'm kind of going backwards with what I thought of both Venom movies versus what everyone else and the critics thought. First one I thought was a little bit better than what everyone said, and the second one I think is like worse than what everyone is saying. But it's very slight. Like it doesn't seem like these movies have a very strong, passionate fan base that's defending the hell out of it. Like everyone kind of knows what the movie is. And I know what it is too. It's just not a movie that's, for me, but I get it. And it does the job that it's supposed to be doing. And how you would improve upon that job, I don't know. I mean, this character is not one that I've always been too fascinated with. And it's also maybe something that, if it were to be done, maybe it's just better to have it in a movie with someone else. Like, I think the Venom character itself is fine. I get a little annoyed at the whole Eddie Brock Venom two-sided persona and a lot of the dialogue overlapping. And actually, that was kind of my biggest issue with the movie. It just felt like everything was rushed, including the dialogue, which just felt overlapped so much. It became kind of hard to pay attention. But seeing the character with other characters would be interesting. I mean, they had Venom in Spider-Man 3, and I did not find that it was, bad. I know people said it's a bad interpretation of the character, but I didn't think it was actually bad to fit him into that movie, even though that movie is packed with so many things. I wouldn't say putting Venom in that movie is kind of the failure of that movie. I would say it's maybe just keeping one too many storylines in, but I think you still could have fit Venom into the movie the way they did. And I liked Venom in that movie. I thought it was all right. Maybe Topher Grace wasn't the best Eddie Brock on the planet, but for that kind of universe, for the Raimi universe, I thought it worked. And I would love to see Venom with other characters. Yeah, they've been talking about a Venom versus Tom Holland Spider-Man movie. I would see that. I would also love to see, as some people have been talking about, and Ryan Reynolds has actually been liking some of these tweets, a Venom slash Deadpool movie. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, it makes perfect sense to put those characters together. They have similar enough personalities, but also enough differences where I think having them team up would be an interesting combo. I would really enjoy watching that. So, yeah, that's how I feel. I just don't know about a Venom movie being headlined. It's just Venom only. I'm not so sure. And just the way they've gone about it, I'm not a big fan. And maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's just like, I know the comics were popular in the 90s, and it does really feel like that. It feels like something that was taken straight out of the 90s, and not in the worst way, but it's like, again, we're in the year 2021. I don't know if we want to see like a 90s rendition of a Venom movie done with updated effects and updated actors. Like, I don't know. But again, it's not something that I feel too strongly about one way or another. If you like the movies, I mean, more power to you. I mean, they're definitely fun when they need to be fun. I thought the sequel was annoying, but it can be fun, and the fight was good. It was cool to finally see Venom fight Carnage. It was something that I knew about as a kid, and it was cool to finally see. Let's talk about the real thing. Let's talk about that after credit scene. I mean, I think a lot of people have already heard about it, but let's just really dig into this. With all the talk about Spider-Man being in the multiverse, all these other villains from previous movies being brought into No Way Home, how the multiverse was cracked open in the MCU with Loki, and WandaVision touched upon it a little. Now, What If is digging into all the different universes. They're doing the multiverse. Like, this is the new phase. This whole phase is going to be multiverse, and we've been building towards it. We've been teasing it for a while, and, with Disney buying 20th Century Fox, getting all the X-Men characters so they can simply reboot X-Men, but also feel tempted to take some of those actors and bring them back to the roles, and with rumors that certain X-Men characters are going to be in the upcoming Doctor Strange movie, and the fact that Hugh Jackman made it very clear that he would love to be in the MCU. When he was being done with Wolverine with the film Logan in 2017, he said in an interview, the only reason I'd come back would be to be in the Avengers. It's clear to me that they have to find a way to bring some of these characters back if they want, but also leave the door open to reboot them, have their own versions of these characters in the MCU, but also bring back the old stories. And, for a while, there was this idea, especially with Spider-Man, because Spider-Man has already shown that they are going to be, like, Alfred Molina's back. So it's clear that they're bringing back the actors to play these characters, and they de-aged Alfred Molina. So it's like, okay, he's the Doc Ock from Spider-Man 2, right? But there was this thing that was still holding me back, making me wonder, is he just Doc Ock from a different universe that's not quite the universe from Spider-Man 2, but similar enough, but we're going to make enough differences with the universe he comes from that, it doesn't ruin his redemption arc in Spider-Man 2? Possibly. How do these characters even be brought into the MCU exactly? Is it because of the Doctor Strange spell? Is it because of what happens in Loki? Is it that they make enough changes that they start crossing into that multiverse, and now that the time variance authority isn't around anymore, they don't get pruned, so they end up, like crossing over completely into different universes? I don't know. It didn't seem like a lot of this was explained yet, and we made our theories. We all were kind of guessing what was going to happen in Spider-Man No Way Home, but we haven't really had a whole lot of actual confirmation yet. We've mostly had rumors, thoughts, theories, and some actors kind of confirming it. But again, Alfred Molina, as much as he says, yeah, I'm being brought right back out of Spider-Man 2, I don't feel like that's still as much of a confirmation, because that's what the director told him. And I always thought, well, the director might have been just telling him that because he's playing the same character, but is it actually the exact same character from Spider-Man 2? And, the biggest question, too, was that with some of these Sony movies and maybe some of these Marvel movies that aren't owned by Marvel, yeah, we have the X-Men movies that are now owned by Disney, but are those X-Men characters ever going to be brought over? I mean, they confirmed that they're making the Deadpool 3, but the way that character breaks the fourth wall so much, I don't know if anyone's going to be too bothered by the continuity of bringing Deadpool in to the MCU. But some of those other characters, like, how easy was it going to be to bring them all into it? Are they going to actually show it happening? Are they just going to bring the actors back and not really address it? Are they going to actually state that they had previous lives? And this could also fix some of the continuity issues in the X-Men universe, because you could just throw your hands up and be like, well, the reason that movie doesn't match up with that movie is because that movie's in a different universe that's very similar to this universe, but they're actually different universes. I don't know. But Venom, Let There Be Carnage actually did something that none of the other movies have really done yet, which is confirm the multiverse in the films that other studios own, or at least in different universes that are completely different from the MCU. I had heard a leak about this movie, and I had my own thoughts for a while, where Sony was deliberating with, Marvel about how they were going to share Spider-Man, and it was obvious that Sony knew that they would make money off of their Spider-Man movies if it was included in the MCU, just from all the free publicity that the Avengers pretty much gives them. If your movie's part of the MCU at this point, you're guaranteed a lot of money. And that was going to help Spider-Man out a lot, because even though those movies were making money, they're making even more money now. And that was going to help some of their other movies too that were part of their Spider-Man universe, or at the time I think it was called the Sony universe of Spider-Man characters or something. Like it was a weird title, but they finally simplified it and called it like the Spider-Man universe. But we didn't still exactly know what that meant, because Venom in 2018 did not seem like it was part of the MCU at all. It was called in association with Marvel, but it didn't seem like it was exactly part of the MCU universe. They didn't address anything in the MCU, but they also didn't deny it. But one of the biggest takeaways was that, the Daily Bugle in Venom was a paper, much like the Raimi universe. But in the MCU, the Daily Bugle, which was established in Far From Home, is more like an InfoWars internet TV show, web show type thing, that somehow gets attention in on Broadway somehow with all the TV signs in New York or whatever. But then again, they were sharing it because they actually had really big breaking news. So yeah, but anyway, I was thinking like Daily Bugle was like just different in the MCU versus it's a completely different medium versus what it was in Venom, which was the more traditional route of the comics. So I knew that Venom 2018 was not part of the MCU, but when I had heard this leak about the sequel, that the after credit scene was going to feature Tom Holland's Spider-Man, and I heard some audio of it, I started to think, okay, so it sounds like Venom is gonna be in the MCU, or they're referencing it, and the Marvel Cinematic Universe is allowing this, and they're gonna say, yeah, this Venom and the previous Venom movie as well are part of the MCU. And part of me was a little disappointed just because I didn't like the way they were going about it. I thought if this leak is true, they're really just gonna declare he's part of it and not really address the fact that there's kind of continuity errors if he is part of it. It seems kind of messy for Marvel, and I don't know if someone like Kevin Feige would go for this. And also, I didn't even know if that leak was true because it was just audio, and some of the audio sounded like it was coming from Far From Home when J.K. Simmons was at the end of Far From Home, so it was like, this could have been faked. However, then I saw the movie on Friday, and we got to the after credits scene. And at first, they're in some other country right now. Venom and Eddie Brock are. They're in some really crappy hotel watching some Spanish soap opera. And basically, Venom's like talking up, oh, us symbiotes, we have all this vast knowledge that if we shared it with you, it would implode your mind. I could give you just a little sample. And Eddie Brock's like, what are you going to show me? Do it or whatever. And it seems like Venom's maybe doing something at first because the room starts shaking, light is flashing. But then Venom does declare it's not him doing this, so it was just a happenstance. Something else starts going on. And then the hotel room completely changes. And at this moment, I was like, holy crap. Was that leak true? Was that a real leak? And are we about to see the exact clip that I had heard only an audio of? Because remember, the audio that was shared was only a quick snippet. It was not this whole scene. It was only the ending of this scene. It was not even the ending because there's actually another thing that happens right after where we'll get to that. But basically, this little snippet sounded so faked and quick, and at the time felt so kind of rushed, like it wasn't done properly for my taste, where I thought these Venom movies can't be in this Marvel Cinematic Universe because continuity-wise, I just don't buy it. But then we see the room change. It becomes a super nice hotel out of nowhere. Venom and Eddie Brock do not get what happened. And the TV changes also. And suddenly, there it is. We see J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson doing a Daily Bugle report. And the Daily Bugle logo, and it's a TV show just like in the MCU. And the Daily Bugle logo is the one from the MCU. And then we see Tom Holland's Spider-Man on TV, and it's like the news report that was similar to the one at the end of Far From Home. And Venom looks at it and he's like, "Ooh, that guy looks good." And like basically kind of building up, "Oh, are they gonna meet up? Is this fight gonna actually happen?" Pretty awesome. But also it confirms that that's how these characters are gonna be carried over. They actually show characters being carried over through the multiverse. Eddie Brock and Venom come from a different timeline, a timeline where this hotel is actually a really nice hotel, and there's another guy in it. So that's the ending joke. There's this guy who walks out. He's like, "What are you doing in my room?" And that's it. Just ends. And it's kind of funny, but also like the theater was going crazy. Everybody knew what was going on. And honestly, if you have an idea of like, especially like about the corporate politics of different movie studios, I know that like Sony and Marvel made this deal with Spider-Man that's pretty damn unique and pretty touchy, obviously. I mean, a couple, like 2 years ago, they were having a fight about that character and how that character was going to be done with the MCU. Spider-Man 3 was, the third Homecoming film anyway, was not going to be in the MCU. We're just going to take Tom Holland and we're going to put him in a different movie. And, there's a big mess going on. I'm starting to wonder if a lot of those fights maybe had to do more with the fact that they really wanted Venom and some of their spin-off films, like the upcoming Morbius, which now that we saw Michael Keaton, it makes me wonder. I'm like, so was Morbius brought into the MCU the same way? Or was Michael Keaton's character taken out of the MCU the same way to a different universe where Morbius exists? Makes you wonder, but now it makes more sense that we saw Michael Keaton in that trailer for Morbius. And I'm wondering, though, if that was what the fight was actually about between Sony and Marvel. Maybe Marvel didn't want to do that kind of business because they don't have the same quality control over those films versus what they have with Spider-Man and, Marvel's own films. And maybe they didn't want all those films included in the MCU. Maybe also that was what, at the time, because for a while there's been email leaks going back to like 2014 where basically the studio heads of Sony wanted to do like an Andrew Garfield versus Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie. It was only briefly talked about, but clearly it was in their heads for a while. And now all these years later, we're actually getting a Spider-Man movie where apparently, allegedly, and we don't have proof yet, but given what that email talked about, they've been wanting to do this for a while, and now everyone's talking about it. But yeah, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield are apparently in No Way Home. And it makes me wonder, maybe that's what the fight was about too. Maybe Marvel didn't really want to go for that idea, and maybe Sony was like, "We're gonna do this idea regardless, and we don't need your approval, and we'll just be out of the MCU and we'll do this movie." I don't know, but I feel like maybe that's what more of the fight was about now. And now that this movie's out and it shows, Venom, Let There Be Carnage, that the end credits scene shows Eddie Brock and Venom being carried over to a different universe. I feel like this was the best scenario. It gives the chance for these movies to still be in their own universe, not necessarily impact anything in the MCU, but if they want to have fun and carry over to the MCU for certain movies, they can now with the multiverse. And I thought it was done super well. But again, it also confirms that this is how the characters are going to be brought over. So now it confirms, kind of like it was almost like 100% confirmed in the past, but now I think it's definite that the characters that are going to be featured in No Way Home, like Green Goblin, Doc Ock, are not going to just be characters that are similar to other universes from other films, but they may actually be the exact same characters. And that's kind of been a rumor for a while, but again, it's all rumors, it's all reported leaks, but nothing is definite yet. But after seeing this movie and actually seeing it in action, it gave me goosebumps watching it because I just knew that this is a big deal. Like, this is a huge deal for movies, studios working together to make something happen, and for Marvel in general. Like, this really opens up the door for how... And I know, like, other shows have already been doing it. Like, Loki already kind of opened this door, but like I said, it's different when you are being, like, it's being built up and you see it in Loki and you're like, yeah, and other movies can bring these characters back, but we haven't seen it yet. It's a whole different thing, though, when you actually effing see it. It was nuts. And, it's just making my, it's making, like I said, I wasn't a big fan of the movie, but it's almost one of those movies where it's like, it's kind of worth it to watch just for that end credit sequence, because it's actually that good. And just, not even on the filmmaking level or anything like that. In fact, I find that two of the jokes that they do at the end kind of fall flat, but in that specific scene. But just the 14-year-old self in me was finally like, this is so awesome. As if Avengers already did this much, and then Endgame really went crazy. You know, did things that I, as a kid, never thought was going to happen and always wanted to happen. Now that Venom opened up this door, it's like, wow, we may even see these legacy characters, these characters from really old Marvel movies that we thought these actors would never come back. They are done. There's confirmation that they could easily come into it. And like I said, we kind of had that confirmation before, but it's a whole different scenario when you actually see it in action. And I'm like, I'm amped for what's next. Bring me some Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. Just for one movie, I don't care. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Venom, Let There Be Carnage, and its end credit sequence.